Okay, we're going to be going over the Developer Debug Tools plugin. We're on version 2.0.3, and this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy video because there are so many tools in this plugin to help developers debug and test things. It's not even funny. So let's just jump right into it. We're going to go to our admin area of our website and go to the plugins and add a new plugin, and we'll type in Developer Debug Tools. And we can see right over here, we'll go ahead and install that and activate it. And then we're going to jump right over to the settings. Okay, now when you first install the plugin, you're going to see this notice at the top here, and it's basically just making sure that you as a developer have your email address in this email field. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to take advantage of everything. All the other users, including other admins, are not going to have access to the same stuff you are unless they have their email addresses in here. So first and foremost, make sure that your email is in this field. Double check that the time zone is correct. If it's not automatically populating, this is taking the time zone from your site as a default. But if for whatever reason it's different, you can change this here. And what this is going to do is make sure that all of your logs and everything are going to reflect your time zone rather than the site's time zone. And we're going to go ahead and save changes. And that's going to clear that notice there. Now, before we go into the other options, we're going to go ahead and walk through each of the tabs and then some of the settings we might need to change along the way. So there's no need to go through that more than once. You will notice that there is a notice at the very, very top saying what's new in this version. If you click that, it will take you to the change log and it'll clear that notice. We, of course, don't need to go through the change log, but that is there for convenience. So let's go ahead and jump right into the plugins tab here. Now the plugins tab is going to have a detailed list of all of your plugins with a little extra information that the normal plugin page doesn't have, such as the description of the plugin, file size, the path, etc. This is just a breakdown of each of the plugins so that you have all the information you need. And it does highlight the plugin if it was last updated over a year ago or if the WordPress compatibility is off. Now, if you have a whole lot of plugins, it's a good idea to just update the cache here. And what that does is it caches this information so it's not constantly pulling it every time you load the page. So I would recommend doing that if you are going back and forth and looking at this page often. If you want a simple list of the plugins, you can click on the View Simple List, and that's just going to show you the names and the versions of each of the plugins so that you can quickly copy and paste them or whatever you need to do. There is also a button here for recommended plugins. If you click on that, it'll take you to your plugin page with a new tab called Dev Debug Tools, and this tab has a whole slew of plugins that are dedicated to debugging or testing or whatever might help you as a developer or admin. But we're going to go ahead and jump back now and move on to the Activity Logs tab. Now, the activity logs will log all sorts of different things for you. And to set those up, we're going to do that in settings. So let's jump right over to settings here. And then we're going to scroll down until we get to the activity log section. Now, you can log all sorts of things here. What I generally like to do is log deleting accounts, updating roles, deleting posts and pages, anything to do with plugins and themes. And obviously there are other things that we can do that are completely up to you. Let's go ahead and just select the visiting posts and pages so that I can show you what that looks like. And I'm going to select updating site settings as well. And then if you scroll down here, you'll also see some options for you to omit different keys, whether they're user meta keys, post meta keys, setting and option keys. So since we're doing the updating site settings, this one right here will be the one that we want to update if there are certain options and settings that we don't want to log. And by default, there's a few ones on here. Obviously, we don't want to log every time there's a transient saved, for example. And for the other ones, they would be pertaining to the updating posts and pages and the updating user meta. So let's go ahead and save this. And then we're going to jump back over to the activities log. And you can see, of course, there's still no activity here. So let's go ahead and test it out. So let's go to the front page of our site. Now, if we go over to privacy policy, for example, or to the sample page and go back over to the activity log and refresh the page, you'll see how our activity was logged here. And what it's going to do is it's going to log it to this activity.log file in the uploads directory. Now, if you have a lot of activity, you can search through it, filter it. There's also some links here for quick filtering. And then you can switch over to a classic view as well, which is similar to a debug log. This is exactly how it's going to be logged, but I much prefer the easy reader. So I'm going to switch back over to that. Now, generally speaking, I keep the activity logs for as long as I need to review them. So when I'm on the site just about every day, I will go on, take a look at them, and clear them. So if I just clear the activity log, that will dump it all, and I'll have to start fresh again. Now, you may have seen also there's a download button, and that'll download the log directly from your server if you need to back that up for any reason. So we're going to go ahead and skip the error logs for now, and the error types and the error suppressing, because you can't do that until you enable your debug log. So, and we do that in the WP config tab. Now, this tab has a quick view of your configuration file. It does redact some important information, so if you're showing it to somebody, then it's not going to show them all the sensitive data. But you can highlight the information and it'll be visible to you if you want to, or you can just download it, which can be done at the very bottom with the download button here. Let's go back up here and we can see a quick view, like I said, of the debug log. And then it has a list of all of your backups that are found on your server. And then this other section here is for snippets. So the snippets is, of course, under beta testing right now. And what that does is it allows you to modify your debug log with certain snippets. So, for example, we have an option to enable the debug mode, as well as enabling the logging, displaying of errors, and so forth. And how this works is it's first going to detect whether or not these defines are listed on your debug log. So you can see that this one is detected here, and that is WP debug define. And so if we go up here, you can see that this is where it's showing. Now what we want to do is switch that over to a true value because we want to enable it. So we can update it here and then click edit, and then so it has a proposed change, which is exactly what we want. So we're going to go ahead and save that. But it hasn't updated yet, so this is just how we're going to update it. So we're also going to want to add the debug log define and the display as well. And then let's go down here and turn on some other stuff that we want. We don't want to cache anything while we're developing our website for the first time. So let's go ahead and add that. We're going to disable caching. We're going to disable the fatal error handler, which is basically just emailing me every time there's a fatal error while I'm in development. I don't want to get an email every single time. So we'll turn that on. And then we can do all sorts of other things. If you need to know what those are, there is a question mark icon here that you can click, and it'll give you a little bit more information about it. But let's move on. We're going to go to Force SSL admin, and then let's do clean up image edits. You can go ahead and leave the rest as is. There is an option to change your end of line delimiter. If you don't know what that is, just leave it as is. But if you do, and you know that you're working off of different systems, this is a way to reset that for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to first download our current version so that we always have a backup. And then we're going to preview the update, which is going to show you exactly what it's going to look like after I confirm the change. So this looks good. You always want to check this to make sure nothing is broken. Because if it is, you want to cancel it and make sure that it's not going to screw everything up, because it will break your site if something gets messed up. So always make sure that you double check this and you have a downloaded copy beforehand. But everything looks good here, which is basically just adding this section at the very top. And we're going to go ahead and confirm. And now you can see that it's been updated successfully, as well as having a backup automatically added onto our server if we ever need to do that. I, of course, downloaded one myself as well, but if I need to, I'll go through my FTP or file manager and restore my config file. There is a backup, so I can basically just take this file that's here and rename it by removing this section with the date, and then delete the other one, of course, and then I'll have a restored version. But coming down here, now you can see that my current version now has this section at the top with the snippets that I added, and everything else is intact. And what it did do was it took that one debug log define and it moved it to the top because I changed the value. So it's not going to show up twice. If your configuration file does have something that's showing up twice for whatever reason, so let's say you have the debug log set as false and another line that shows it as true, it's going to show a warning at the top that says there's multiple values of the same define, which is handy because I have taken over sites where that was going on, and I was able to quickly see that and make those changes. So now if we come back down here, you can see that everything has been changed, it's been detected, and now you can see that the debug log is detected, the current is showing true. And if I want to remove it, I would just select remove on these and save the changes, and it's going to take them off. But I don't want to do that because I want to show the debugging tabs, and everything else looks good. So let's go ahead and move over to the HT Access tab, because anytime you enable the debug log, it becomes public. And we want to hide that from anybody being able to access it. And we can do that through the HT Access tab. This is very similar to the WP Config tab, where you have your current HT Access file, and then you've got backups listed, and then you have snippets that you can add and remove. Now, the only difference between this section is we don't have an update column. It's a little bit more strict because there's so many different options that you can add, and it gets very finicky if we try that. But it does give you the option, like I said, to add or remove. So we're going to add a few that are pretty important for security reasons, such as restricting unauthorized access to the login and admin area. We're going to protect important WP and server files. And then this is the one that I was talking about, where you can prevent the debug log from being public. And all it's going to do is it's going to deny everybody but you. So it'll show your IP address, which is your server address, and that will give you access, but nobody else. So moving forward, we can enable redirect to the HTTPS, which if you have an SSL certificate, that's what you want to do. Basically, anytime somebody goes to HTTP without the S, it's going to redirect them to the secure version of the site automatically. Again, all these are explained by clicking on the little info tab. But let's move forward and do disable index browsing and prevent script injections, the includes directory, username enumeration, and then I'm going to block bots from the WP admin area. The rest of this stuff I could go ahead and just leave as is. Again, I want to download this first to have my own copy, and then I'm going to preview the update. Just like the other one, we want to make sure that everything looks good. This time it's going to add it to the bottom rather than the top. And everything looks good to me, so I'm going to confirm an update. And then just like the config file, we have a backup also made on the server that we can restore if needed. But now we have our current version here that looks good. And now our security is a lot better. So now that we've set that up, let's go ahead and move over to the error logs tab. And now this is changed to no errors found rather than it's not enabled. So in order to look at the errors, we obviously need to make an error. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this, create a few errors, and come back. Okay, now that I have added some errors here, you can see how they show up. So it's very similar to the activity log, but what we're going to see here is the type of error and the actual error itself. So it highlights what the error is and shows you where it's coming from and where you can find it. So it's very, very helpful. So one of them was done on this plugin just to show you that it does show you what plugin it came from and what line to find it on. And then if you wanted to, you can click on this and go to the file editor. Of course, it's not recommended to edit stuff in the plugin file editor or the theme file editor, but it is an option if you at least want to go and look for it and check out the code. That's an option there. So you can see what time it was, which of course, again, is in my time zone. And then it shows you the number of errors that show up. So you can see that this one was 2. So I made the same exact error twice, which was an undefined function. I just made up a function and it gave me a fatal error. And I loaded that twice. So it's going to show me only one time and tell me what the quantity is. So that way it's going to lump all of the same errors together rather than just showing multiple instances of the same error. So this really condenses things down and makes it easier to read. We do have a help column as well, which gives you the ability to do some quick searches about the error. So if you look down in the bottom left of the screen, you can see that this is going to search Google for that exact error. And then you can also Google for the past year, Google with the path included, and then we can Google with the theme name as well, just in case it might be a theme error. And then you can see on the plugin one, there's a plugin support one. So it's going to link right to the support page on the wp.org plugin repo. And then we also have a Google Stack Overflow link and a Stack Exchange link. So those just make it easier for you to just quickly jump to search results, and you can change them however you need to. But that makes it helpful to get to the bottom of errors if you don't know exactly how to fix them or where to fix them. Now, some of them, like the second one here, does show a stack trace, so we include those as well. And then, of course, some of them are unknown. For example, this is an unknown because it's actually using the error log function to write that string to the error log. So pretty straightforward. And again, just like the activity log, you can search or filter for different types. And then you can also look at the classic view, which is probably what you're used to when you look at a debug log. This is showing you the actual debug log itself, which you can see has multiple of the same error here. And obviously, This is way more difficult to read than the easy reader, but even here we convert the time to your time zone. But if you download it, it's of course going to show you in a UTC time zone. Now, once you've gone through all of your errors and you've fixed everything, you can clear the log pretty easily. We're going to switch over to the easy reader so that we're not stuck on this. And then we'll go ahead and just clear this debug log, and you can see it's all wiped out, and it's an empty debug log. You don't have to worry about going in, clearing the errors, and re-uploading it to through your FTP or your file manager. It just makes the process so much easier. Now, this brings me to the next things, which are going to be your error types. If you click on that there. Now, some hosts will allow this and some hosts won't. So it basically gives you a little bit more flexibility in what kind of errors you want to see in your logs. And if you look at the actual column here, this is going to show you what your logs are actually enabled through your host. But you can change these if you want to only see errors, for example, and no warnings. Then you can turn off the different types of warnings and save that. And of course, you want to make sure that you enable this as well, and then save your changes. And then, depending on your host, it may or may not actually control those different types of errors. But if you're on a host that allows you to, this is a great way to manage that. So there is a spot on the very bottom too that you can convert error reporting codes to constants. So you can see, for example, this 8192. If we plug that in down here and hit enter, you can see these are the different error codes that reporting code provides. So it's going to highlight all the different ones that includes. It's purely for informational purposes, but it can be handy if you're looking for that. So we're going to move on to error suppressing. And again, this is a host by host kind of situation, but it does give you the option, if your host will allow it, to suppress certain errors. So if you have, for example, an error that is repeatedly flooding your logs and you don't want to see them, you can add them here. And for example, if we wanted to do something like unexpected end of file, you can do that and then update it, and you'll have your suppressed errors down here. And you can add a note if there's something that you want to remind yourself with. You can also pause it temporarily, and so you don't have to come back and add it again, and then you can remove it altogether. And what that's going to do is it's going to search through that and try to keep that from adding to your debug log. Now, of course, like I said, it's a host by host situation, so it may not work for you, but if your host does, then this is a fantastic tool to help declutter your debug logs while you're in the process of trying to get something to work properly. So moving forward, we can jump over to the functions.php file tab. And what that's going to do is give you the option to download your current functions.php file, or you can view it right from here. If you know you don't have a whole lot going on your functions.php file, then by all means just view it from here. But if you have a really, really big one, then it might not load properly, so downloading is probably the better option. So obviously that's just the stock 2025 functions.php file. Now let's move on to the php.ini tab. Now this does give you a rundown of all of your php.ini values, which is extremely helpful if you're looking for those things. Now, the same goes with the PHP info tab. It's purely informational, but it gives you all of your PHP information at a glance, which is hugely beneficial. The server tab will give you a breakdown of your CPU information. as well as your memory information. And some of this information is also at the very, very top here. You can see your CPU load and how it's faring. And then you have your memory usage as well. So, and these will show up red if you are maxing out. And that way it's a very quick glance. It shows up at the top of every tab. But this is a breakdown if you want to look at things in more depth. The cron jobs tab shows you all of your cron jobs that are currently set up. It's kind of similar to the WP cron plugin, but it doesn't give you the ability to set up your own crons like that plugin does. So this is just a table that shows you what is set up. The cookies tab here shows you all of the different browser cookies that are going on with you. You can test a cookie, you can do the give me a test cookie button, and it will show you, it'll add a new cookie to your browser, and then you can clear your browser cookies, clear your browser local storage, which really helps when you're trying to test certain things out. Same thing with the transients. It's going to work very similar. You have a list of all of your transients, whether they're expired or not. You can view more, and it'll show you, it'll break it down. This is the actual value, and then it'll, if it's an array, for example, it'll show you in a pretty print, so it's easier to read. And then you can purge those that are expired, or you can delete all of them at once. That is very, very helpful when you're trying to reset things and test things out. And then if we move on to the site options tab, this is very similar to the other table where you can see some of the transients, but this is all of your site options. Now, it will give you the ability to search through these options as well. So if you have an option, for example, my active plugins, if I copy that and paste that here and do a quick search, it will do a breakdown of just that one option. And I can always copy this and share that with another member of my team, and if they need to quickly view that, or I can bookmark it or whatever, which is pretty helpful. Now, if I go back, I do have an all site options link as well, and this is something that you, if you are a developer, you are used to seeing. So if we click that, you can see that this is the area that you can edit a lot of those site options, such as your admin email or whatnot. But I, of course, put a warning on there because if you aren't careful and you start editing site options straight from that page, it can potentially break things if you don't know what you're doing. So now moving on to globals. Globals shows you different global options from this page. So obviously it's not going to show you the values on other pages, but if you are back here, for example, I use the menu one a lot to see what my menu values are. If I can fetch the value for, in this example, you can see what that returns, and that will be a really easy way for me to manipulate my menu however I want. If I'm building a new plugin, then this is a great way to find out what those values are, and speeds things up for me. Now, if I go to the defines tab, this will show me all the different constants that are defined on the site. And you can see by my scroll bar, there's a ton of them. So this is a great quick glance at what you can use anytime you need to reference something that's a constant. Now let's head over to the DB Tables tab, and that's going to show us all of our database tables. You can see some basic table information here, as well as all of the different tables that are in the database, with a quick view of all of the columns that are in the tables. Then if you click on any of the table names or pick from the drop down and view the table records, it'll take you to a breakdown of all the records in the table. So for example, if we go to the post one and scroll down, you'll see this is the post table here, and it doesn't give you the ability to edit any of the tables. It only gives you the ability to view it. So the benefit of this is that you don't have to go over to phpMyAdmin or wherever you host your databases in to be able to see what's in the tables. And at the same time, you don't have to worry about accidentally editing or deleting anything, which to developers that are not very familiar with SQL databases, it can be quite intimidating. So this is a safer way to view those records. You do also have the ability to search by keyword. So if we wanted to do like blog, for example, and search those records, you can see 2 of them came up. So it is very, very handy. Now the user meta tab and the post meta tab are very similar to each other. And what that does is it gives you the ability to look at the user meta and the post meta for a specific user or post. So in the case of the user meta, you can see the user's information here. If you click on it, it will take you to their profile for you to further edit from here. Or you can do a lot of that from this page as well. So quick breakdown, you can search by the user ID or email. Just plug that in, hit search, and it'll change the user for you. It'll give you their avatar if they've got one, their REST API URL, and this is showing what the status is. So if you click on that, it's going to show you what is public on the REST API. So if you have that blocked, then the status won't show okay. I think it shows up 404 or something. I can't remember. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip these fields for now and move down to the bottom where we have our user object meta, and then we have our custom metadata, which is extra information that is stored on the user profile by either WordPress or plugins or what have you. And what's really great about these is that if you have array values, for example, we have this array that is stored like this as a string, and it's kind of difficult to read. So what this does is it converts it to a readable format, and that is much handier than going to your SQL database and trying to figure out what those values are. So, and then down below that, we have our user capabilities, which is obviously set to true for me on everything because I'm an admin. So now let's go back up to the top and I'll show you some of the stuff that we can do to manipulate the data from this plugin. So right here we have a section for roles where you can add or remove roles. So it'll show you what the current roles are, and then of course the list to choose from to add or remove. And then underneath this is a section where you can add, update, or delete the meta keys. So now it doesn't let you delete user object meta keys, but it will allow you to delete custom meta keys. So for example, we can go ahead and test this out. We're going to go ahead and add a new meta key, and let's just do one for state. And the format's going to be a string, and let's just do a value of Texas, and we'll go ahead and update that. And you can see at the top here that state has been added. And if we scroll down to the bottom, you can see where we have the state meta key here. So now let's go ahead and add another one. And we'll do one for state abbreviation and do TX and update. And then, of course, we will have 2 new meta keys here that start with state. And so we can, if we want to, delete one of the keys. So we can delete one here, or we can delete them, all keys that start with a certain keyword. So for example, if we wanted to do all the keywords that start with state, then it will delete those two that I added. And we'll, of course, choose delete all. There is an option to delete blank only. Obviously, that's not in our case, but that is useful. So we're going to go ahead and choose delete all and update. And you can see at the top, all custom meta keys starting with state have been removed, and it shows you which ones those are. And then, of course, we can verify that by coming down here, and you can see that they're nowhere to be found. So now we can also update any key if we want to, and we can also update the user object keys. So, for example, if somebody changes their email address, we can do that. And when you select one of the keys that you're going to update, it will automatically populate the value for you. Obviously, I'm not going to change my email on here, but that's an easy way to do that. Now, there are some instances with some hosts that will not allow you to update the user login value from here, but more often than not, I am able to do that. The only thing you can't change anywhere is the password. You can just click on here and go to the profile and change it on there. And I believe that is it. So now let's go over to the post meta and show you how that looks as well. It's going to be basically the same thing. It has the title of the post ID, which you can search. And right now it's just showing the most recent post, whereas in the user meta, it's just showing you your user meta as the default. So on here, you can see again, you've got your REST API link, which again is public. And then on this post, and everything else is just the same. We've got post object information, post custom metadata, and then on this one, we actually have all of our taxonomies and comments at a glance. So it's very helpful. I've used it a ton in development. I'm on these two tabs more than most of the other tabs. Now, one thing I didn't point out on the user tab that is also on the post tab is this hide meta keys with prefixes field. What that does is it just hides keys that start with those prefixes, but it's only going to apply to the custom metadata, not the object. So, for example, sometimes there are transients saved in the metadata that we don't want to pay attention to, or something that is added by the theme that is pretty annoying to look at because it's really long and it's in the way. We can add those keys or the prefixes to the keys into that field. For example, if we don't want to see this edit lock, which is the last time it was edited, and we put that here and redo our search, come back down, and you'll see that it's not going to show up anymore. So you can always change that if you want to show them again, but it does give a way to weed that out if you're constantly in and out of this tab trying to figure out why something is updated or why something is not updating. Let's move on to the post types tab. This page gives you a rundown of all of your post types. It'll give you all of your settings and your labels, as well as associated taxonomies for each of the post types. So you can see I've got my post pages, media, revisions, all sorts of things here. I can also jump right to a certain one. If I wanted to just go to the page, it makes it really easy to check if something is set a certain way. And if I go to the taxonomies, it's going to be very similar to where it shows me all of my taxonomies and the associated post types. So here you can see categories, tags, etc. So now if I go over to the media library tab, This is a helpful tab that shows all of your media library files. So this breaks it down and shows you what the title is, the type of file it is, the URL, so you can click on it and go to it. You can also see at a glance which ones have alt text and which ones don't, which if you're paying attention to accessibility during your development of the website, you'll definitely want to make sure that all of the images have alt text. And a really handy thing that we added was a column for the posts and pages that this image is tied to. So if it is a featured image, for example, it'll show up here, and then you can go to that page and edit it. Big thing that I don't like about the media library itself is the fact that I've got so many images on my sites that I don't know where they're being used or if they're being used at all. And this gives me a great way to be able to just check and see if it's being used in certain posts or pages. And then if it's not showing up, of course, I want to just make sure that they're still not in the header or the footer or used as a background somewhere. But this definitely speeds things up when I'm trying to clean up my library. Moving on, going to auto drafts. An auto draft is a temporary draft that is created when you start a new post. So you hit new post and then you change your mind. You're going through it. You're like, no, I don't need to add a new post right now. So you back out of it, you leave, and you never end up actually creating that post. So the auto draft is created anyway. As soon as you hit that add new post button or add new page button, this is created and it's stored on your database. And you might have just a few, or you might have dozens and dozens of them. This page gives you the ability to look at those auto drafts and delete them, clear them all out, and then you don't have to worry about them taking space in your database. So the domain tab gives you some public information about the domain. It's not foolproof. It's not going to access everything like it would on your host. If you look at your DNS records from your host, you're going to see a little bit more information, but this does give you a little bit of a breakdown of some of the information about your domain. So it tells you if you have an active SSL certificate, when it expires, what your host name is, and then some of the records down below. So we can also check propagation, who is an MX toolbox, which gives us a whole lot more information. So for example, we hit propagation and it will show where our domain is propagated. So if we had changed a domain recently, then you can just quickly check that, which can be helpful. I've used it a handful of times. I'm not sure how often you'll actually use it, but you can also use this to check other domains, not just your own. It just populates your own as a default. So if we move on to the APIs tab, this is a neat little tool that checks your statuses of all of your APIs. So it shows you a list of all the different APIs that are on your website, which can be a ton. You probably don't even realize how many you have until you look here. But this does give you a good quick way to see which ones are available. And then if you want to check the status, you can hit the check button. It'll tell you what the status is of that individual API. And then if we wanted to double check and look at that actual API, we can click on the link and it'll show it right here. Now I do have a Pretty Print extension on my browser, which allows me to view that information, which is very helpful. But obviously this is what you'll see if you don't have that extension. Another way to do a quick check is to hit the check all API statuses, and that's going to run through all of them and tell you what the status is one by one, all at a glance. So very, very, very helpful. The shortcode finder tab This page gives you a rundown of all of the different shortcodes you have available to you and where they're found within the files. And then if you wanted to search where those shortcodes are on your website, you can come up here under the shortcode field, choose which one you want to look for, and hit search. And then you can see shortcode was not found in any of these post types, which it's a brand new site. It's a fresh install, so I probably don't have any of these right now. But if I wanted to, for example, go to my post or my pages, and let's just put one on my sample page here, and hit save. And then you can see that that's just going to show me hello, my name. And then let's just go back to the plugin here and go to shortcode finder, and we'll try this again here. So we'll go to example and do a search, and now you'll see there's one found, and it'll show you what page it's on, the post type, post status, and how many times it's found. So it is pretty handy when you're looking for something in particular, especially if you are the one that created the shortcode and then you want to know where it's being used. So if you make any changes, you can check and make sure that they're working properly on all the pages that it's showing. The next tab is the Rejects tab. And this is just a small regex playground that allows you to test different regex patterns. It does give you a cheat sheet of different patterns as well, and a little bit of a breakdown of each of the modifiers. Now, I used to use this a lot more often, and I've ended up moving to regex101.com to do a lot of my regex testing, just because it's so much more robust. But this is a way to do it really quickly if you want to. And basically, if you use these as examples, we can copy this string here and put it in the string field, and then copy this pattern and put it here, and then we'll test it, and then you can see what the outcome is. So I'll show you how to use it as in a preg match all function, and then this is going to be the result. Now, if we go over to the testing tab, this page gives you the ability to use this page as a testing ground for PHP. So it does give you some instructions here, which I'm not going to go into right now because it involves downloading a file, uploading it to your current theme's root folder, etc. And we just don't want to go through the whole process of using FTP or file manager and all that. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. But the instructions are pretty clear, so you shouldn't have any issues. So let's move on to the Available Functions tab. This is a breakdown of all the different functions that are available for you to use while you're debugging and testing. So these are ones that we've created. So obviously, if you don't have the plugin installed and you're still using these on your site, then they're going to end up breaking your site because the functions don't exist. So just make sure that the plugin is installed and activated, and then you can use these all you want. I will say that some of the most commonly used ones that I use, one is the DPR one. That is a short version of the DDTT print R function. It works the same exact way. It's just a shorter version, but you can use this as an alternative. But basically all it is it's a more robust version of your print R function. And the way that I use it, for example, if I open up my IDE, you can see here, this is my functions.php file, and this is just the end of the 2025 stock version. It's not a child theme or anything like that, but you can still see how I would be able to use it. So let's just move down a little bit. So let's just say I have an array of Joe, Jill, and John, and I want to print that array just like I would with print R it would show me that array, but it wouldn't print it in a pretty print way. You'd have just a run-on sentence that's really difficult to read. So to be able to read it in a format that is readable, you would wrap those in pre-tags and all sorts of things. So this automatically does it. So you could just attach ddtt underscore before the function, or you can use the short version, which is just dpr. And that's going to make it in a very readable way. The other thing it does is if something is a true value or a false value, then it's, instead of showing 1 or a blank like print R would do, it's going to show you the word true or false. Now there are some other parameters. The next one would be the user ID, which is developers by default. So right now only I will be able to see this. So if I print on the front end of the site, nobody else will be able to see that print R value unless they're listed as one of the developers in the settings. Now, if you did want to test it as a different user, you would plug in their user ID. For example, if their user ID was 3, the next parameter is a left margin. How much margin on the left side of the print do you want to add? So if you wanted to add, say, 400 pixels, you can just do 400, which, as you can see here, it also has the px, so 400 pixels. So that's obviously going to be a string. And I don't usually use it as a string. I usually set this value as true, which automatically adds 250 pixels. And that is the same amount of pixels as your left menu in your admin area. So if you're trying to debug something in the back and it ends up starting all the information back here and behind the menu, you can't read it. So a helpful way of moving that over for you to read it is to just set this value to true. And obviously, if you're doing it as a developer, you're going to want to not use somebody else's ID. And instead of putting your own ID, you can just set that as null, and that'll know all developers can see it. So I usually do that. For example, if I do a global menu and want to see what the menu is, I can use this. It'll show me the menu and it will move it over so I can see it right above in my page where I need to see it. Now, another really great function that I use a lot is the write log function. And what this does is it writes it to my error log or my debug log, which will show up in my easy reader on my error logs tab. So sometimes I can't actually use the DPR one. For example, if I'm trying to check a value in an AJAX function, I need to be able to log that rather than trying to check it on the page because it's not going to run. So I can easily write that here. Now, this function also will automatically add a prefix showing that it's coming from this plugin so that you know that it's you that is writing to this log rather than something else writing to the log. And you can always change that as well in one of the parameters. So if we move this out of the way and we look at this function here, you can see the prefix is set to true, which adds the ddtt log prefix. You can change this to false, or you can change this to a different prefix if you wanted to. So you could do that as me, and then it will add that every time. Now, it also has a couple of other features where you can add a backtrace or full trace, which I use occasionally if I don't know where an error is coming from. You can also use a different version of the backtrace, which has its own function entirely. There's a whole bunch of different functions. I won't go into each and every one of them, but I did want to point those two out because those ones are by far the most used. I use them in almost everything that I do, and it speeds things up and makes things a lot more readable and organized so that I can debug and test quicker and more efficiently. So now we also have available hooks. So if you do want to modify anything on this plugin, we do have a variety of different things that you can do. So for example, on the WP config tab and the htaccess tab, you can add your own snippets or edit them or remove ones that you don't like. So we've got a hook for the snippets. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. So look through those. If you have any questions, again, just let us know and we'll be happy to help you. The other cool thing about this page is it does allow you to search for available hooks in other plugins. So obviously the DreamHost panel login doesn't have anything. And this is the only plugin on my install. But if you were to have more plugins, you can do a quick search and it'll give you a list of all the different hooks available, which is a time saver if you're looking for something specific. So that is really, really helpful. Next tab is resources. And this resource tab just gives you a bunch of links to different things that are helpful. There's also an admin bar resource icon that if you highlight it, you can jump to those resources. Now there's also a hook in the available hooks section that allows you to modify these links. If you want to add your own or remove some, you can do that. Now, if you don't want this little icon here, you can remove it from settings, and I'll show you where that's at in just a minute. The last tab here is the About tab, and that's just going to have links to our support server and our support page on the WP repo. And then there is a way for you to quickly add some feedback and send it to us. And then we've got a list of some of the other plugins available. So now we'll go over some of the extra features that the plugin provides. Starting with the top header here, we have a list of versions at the top here that show you what the plugin version is, what WordPress version you're on. You have the PHP and jQuery versions, the jQuery migrate version, and then we have our absolute path and lastly, what I showed you before, the CPU load and the memory usage. And if you're on an older version of the plugin, WordPress or PHP, it will show a warning icon letting you know that those can be updated. So now if we go up to the admin bar, in addition to the resources that we added, you can also see at the top right here, we have added our user ID. We've also added a little thing here that shows you when this page was loaded. Now, the reason why we added that was if you are comparing two versions of a page and you don't remember which one was the older version or which one was the newer version, you can look up here and check which one was loaded first. It does come in handy. I don't use it a whole lot, but when I need it, it's there and it's a time saver. So let's jump over to the front end of the site. And on the front end, you can see a couple more things have been added. We have this thing that says not singular. That shows you what the post type is. And this is the home page, so it's going to show you a little bit different. But if we go over to like the privacy policy page, you can see that it's now a page. The ID is 3 and it's published. Same thing if I go to a post, it's going to show you a post type rather than a page type. I think I use the ID more than anything though, and that's so that I can see what page I need to go back and check the metadata on. Moving over from there, there is a shortcode finder on here, and that's showing that there are 0 shortcodes. But like we did on the sample page, if we come over there, you can see that we had our example shortcode added, and now there's going to be 1. And if you highlight that, it's going to show you what shortcodes are found on that page. It's not going to show you the attributes that you used because that can really add up, but it's going to show you the actual shortcode itself, and it'll tell you a quantity if it shows up more than once. It's not going to show you a list of example. It'll just show you example times 4. Okay, now this next thing here is the plus off thing that you see in the admin bar. And what that is it's actually a grid. and it's telling you that the centering tool is off. So if we click on that, it's going to turn it on, and then you can see there are these little bars at the top here, and obviously that's not going to help you a whole lot to center things, but if you click on that, it will cover the entire page and help you center things on the page a little bit easier. It's just a handy little tool for designers. So we can click on that and turn that back off. Now, if we jump back over to the back end here and go to settings, show you a few more things. So let's start with the admin bar settings, which if we scroll down here, you'll see the admin bar section. And since we were talking about that, we can remove that centering tool or the shortcode finder. We can also remove the extra post information that showed the post ID, the status, and the post type. And then we can also remove the My Account enhancements, which is the user ID and the page load time. And then we can remove the resources and the WordPress logo. And then at the bottom here, we have an option to condense the admin bar items, which I like to do when there's a whole lot of stuff up here. You can condense them a little bit. If you choose everyone, it's going to do everyone that has access to the back, or you can just do developer only, or everybody except the developer if you want to. But I'm going to go ahead and hit save changes on that. And if you look at the admin bar up here, you can see as it loads up, now it's super condensed. It's not going to wrap on smaller screens. Now, if I scroll back down here, there's also an option to add all the admin links to the front end. And I really like that because I want to be able to access all of these things quickly from the front end. So if I hit save changes, what that's going to do is it's only going to check it once, and it's going to save them to an option. So if you add more plugins and more things to your admin area, you're going to have to come back and resave this page, and it'll update that again. The reason why we did that was because it's very heavy on performance to be able to constantly check those every time you load the page. So it's better to just save those once, since you're not really updating this a whole lot anyway. But I'll show you what that's like if you go back to the front end and you come over here, and now you can see all of the menu items have been added here instead of just some of the basic stuff. So I'm just going to go back and continue showing some of the other options that we have in our settings. So let's start from the top here. We have a whole bunch of testing options that we can do. The first one is viewing sensitive information. You saw how a bunch of that information was redacted when we looked at the config file and so forth. You can just display that and take and remove that redacting by checking this. And then the next one is the debugging test number. Now, what this is it works in conjunction with a function that's available. So if we go over to the available functions, and down below here, there is a function called increase test number. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the number that you set in the settings, and it's just going to, every time you run this function, it's going to increase that number by 1. So if you're trying to check whether or not the page is refreshed, because sometimes it happens so fast and nothing even blinks when you refresh the page, this will show you what that refresh number is. So it's just a small little tool, but you can always go back and reset that number if you wanted to by changing that in the settings. So if you're not using it, just leave it blank, but it is there as an option. Now, the centering tool that I showed you on the front end, you can also change the width and height of those cells. You do have the option to stop the heartbeat, which is helpful to resolve 503 errors. You can also extend the curl timeout. And then these options right here, I add on every site that I do. And this is to add the quick debug links to your user area and your post and page area, and also your comment area. So if we save the changes here, we can head over to the user section, and then on there, you now have a column for ID. and it'll show you what the ID is, which normally isn't there, and then that little icon that looks like a lightning bolt will take you right over to the user meta tab for that user. So, and that opens up in a new page. So that's really helpful if you need to check user meta information for a specific user. The same thing happens with the posts and the pages. So if we wanted to look at the post ID, for example, we have it here. Pages works the same way, and you can jump over to the post meta tab and look at the information for that individual post or page. Same thing with the comments. It'll add a comment ID. And this one, if you click on it, it's not going to take you to the post meta tab. Instead, it's going to take you to a hidden tab that just shows you the object of that comment. So let's go ahead and close these, and then we'll go back to settings and move on. Now, the last part in this testing options section is the disable extra data on plugins page. Now, what happens if you go to your plugins page, so we have our plugins tab that has all of this extra information. But now, if we go to the plugins WordPress page, it's going to also show that a few more columns. So this extra stuff here, like your main file path, the file size, and the last modified date, those are going to show up on here by default when you install the plugin, which it wasn't there before. But you can disable that if you don't want this information here and you just want to see it on your plugins tab over here. Then you can do that instead. And I mean, if you've got a ton of plugins, then it might be helpful to remove that information and just dedicate that to your plugins tab. It's up to you. The next section here is for logging. First option is to disable error counts. That's this count up here and in the admin bar. And if you've got a lot of errors, it can start to get annoying to look at that constantly. So there's an option to turn it off. I like to keep it on though, because if something comes up while I'm debugging and testing, it shows me at a glance that, oh, there was an error and I need to know what that is right away. So that's good to have. We do have the option to set your default reader on your logs. Right now, by default, it's the easy reader. You can go to the classic, which I showed you before. The maximum debug log size for the viewer is set to 3 megabytes, which if it's a huge size, it's going to warn you. And what this does is it just increases the amount before it gives you a warning. I like to keep mine under 3 megabytes before I clear it out and start fresh with new error logs. But you do whatever you need to do. So there is an option to log the user and the URL with the errors. So if you are trying to figure out where an error came from and you don't know who's triggering it, you can select this and it will start adding the user information with it. That, of course, means they've got to be logged in. So if it is a guest doing that, it's not going to display any information. But if you do have a membership site, this is very helpful to narrow things down. Although you do want to be cautious about it, because if there is an error that's happening all over the place, this will be added all over the place as well, and it starts to clutter things up a little bit. So it's really used to just turn it on, do a little bit of debugging, and then turn it off as soon as you figure it out. It's not meant to be turned on all the time. You can also capture the WP mail failure details in the log by selecting this option. And then down below here, this gives you the ability to change the paths to your different error logs. So if by default, these are the main ones that you'll see, but some hosts will move them to a different location, or you can move them to a different location, trying to hide them from other people whatever you want to do, you can change the paths here. And you can also add additional log files as long as they're TXT files. You can add the new ones here, and they will also show up on that error logging tab. Another cool feature is the ability to send fatal error messages to a Discord channel. So the reason why I did this was because Discord is a much more reliable form of notification rather than using the WP mailer from WordPress. Because sometimes I don't get those emails for sometimes 15 minutes or maybe not ever. If you add a webhook to a server on Discord that you have, and obviously make that private, then you can add the webhook URL here and then just enable it. It will send those fatal errors to your server immediately. So you'll be able to test immediately, respond faster, and handle things like a pro. So we already went over the logging activity. And moving on down, we have a section called Show Online Users. So this is really neat if you have a membership site or if you're working with other developers and there's more than one person that's working on the site. If you turn this on, and we'll go ahead and show you what that looks like, there will be a little dot up here that shows you who's online. So if you highlight it, it'll show you the username, and if it's an admin, it will show admin, otherwise it won't. And then it'll show you the total users. And this is really helpful if you are in the middle of debugging something. You don't want a whole lot of people on your site. And you especially don't want to work on it while there are other admins, or if they are on there, you know exactly if they're online, then you can communicate with them and say, hey, I'm working on this. Just stay away from the page that I'm working on or whatever. But I keep that on at all times on all of my sites because most of them are membership sites, and on all of them I have a team of people that I work with. So it's really helpful to have. Now there are some other settings for that as well. You can change the number of seconds that it continues to check whether or not you're online, because it will store it in a transient for performance reasons. You can also show the last time that they were checked. And if you want to, you can also add a link to the users. So for example, you can copy this right here and plug it into the field. And what that's going to do is it's going to enable the admin bar to be linkable to that page. So now if I click on their name, it'll take me to their profile. So if you don't want that, you can just remove that link, or you can change the link and just use this as a placeholder for the ID and have it go to a front end profile, whatever you want. So now the other cool thing too is you can also prioritize roles to the top. So right now it's just admins, but if I wanted to also prioritize authors, for example, I can do that, and it's going to pop all of the users that are priorities up to the top of the list. And then after those priority users, you're going to see the rest of the logged in users alphabetically. It will not show you who is on the site that is logged out. This is purely for logged in users. And again, we do have the option of informing you on Discord of certain activity. So again, you can put in a different webhook URL for a different channel, like I do, and then you can enable login notifications, intermittent notifications. So for example, if you have another admin that is logging onto the site, you need to know when they are logging in, and if they are still logged in, it will update it every 15 minutes to make sure that it's constantly checking whether or not they're logged in, and it will send a new notification periodically letting you know that they're still online. You can also notify when a page has been loaded, so you can kind of track where people are going. That's nice when you're first starting out and you're wanting to see where people are visiting, or if you're trying to work with somebody specifically and you don't have a whole lot of traffic, you can use this to see what pages they're loading without actually watching them remotely. I usually keep it off though, because we have high traffic on our sites and it can get pretty annoying getting a notification every time somebody is visiting a page. So you can also do the same thing while ignoring developers. So I'm going to keep those off though. And we already went through the admin bar stuff. Down here we have colors, and this is a way to change the colors of the syntax on the different areas of the plugin. So we can change the comment colors, functions and variables, syntax, and text with quotes. Now, lastly, we have the security section, and this is used if you have, for example, other people that are admins, and you don't want them to have access to this whole developer section, or if you don't want them to have access to certain sections of the website. You can add passwords to secure those pages, or you can hide the plugin altogether, require a password to access the tabs, all sorts of things. So that is about it. There's a lot of stuff that this plugin can do, and we keep adding more and more to it. So let us know if it's been helpful to you. And if you have any questions whatsoever or would like to request a feature, you can do so on our Discord server, or you can jump over to the support forum on the repo. And if you're on the repo, you can find our Discord server right here at the bottom. And again, like I said, on the About tab, we have the Discord links right here. So that is it. Hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.